Welcome to the Collide Kids podcast, hosted by Christen Clark. This is a show for kids and families. You are going to meet new people and have fun while you listen. Let's do it!
Hey, y'all. Welcome to the Collide Kids podcast, everyone. I'm your host, Christen Clark. The Collide Kids podcast is a show for kids and families where we learn together how life and faith collide. You know, this week has been a little chaotic in our country, and I don't want to pass by this or pretend it didn't happen. It makes me sad and confused and angry and tired all at the same time. How about you? How's your heart? When you see scary things on the news or hear about people who are hurt or angry or very sad, it can be a lot to take in sometimes. So I hope that you can spend some time talking about things with your family or a good friend or a trusted leader from your church or your school. And you know, you can always talk to God about whatever you're thinking and feeling because He loves you. And if you're feeling okay and you've already been able to talk things out, can I just encourage you to go check in on your friends and family? Ask them if they're okay or if they need someone to talk to. You never know how much some people might need a friend in their life like you right now. They need to know that there is someone else who cares about them and who is on their side, someone who is for them. Well, speaking of being for somebody, today my special guest wrote the book about it, and his name is Jeff Henderson. He is named by Forbes magazine as one of the 20 speakers you should not miss. His background is working with organizations like Chick-Fil-A and the Atlanta Braves, as well as his years launching 3 different churches in the Atlanta area. Jeff's book, Know What You're For, is in response to the For movement he launched 9 years ago. This is currently being implemented by churches and organizations around the world. You know, this conversation was recorded a couple weeks ago, and it couldn't be more timely as we try to figure out how to respond to our neighbors and how to show love and to show that we are for our community. And so here is my conversation with Jeff Henderson. Jeff Henderson, thank you so much for being on the podcast today.
Happy New Year, Christen. Thanks for having me. Good to see you.
Thank you. Good to see you too. I'm so excited about what you're going to share with us today. I just love this movement that you have really started in our area, and it's spread all over. Will you introduce yourself and just tell everybody about who you are and what you do?
Sure. Yeah. So I've been married for this year will be 25 years, this coming October.
Oh,
so me and I have been married 25 years. We're empty nesters now, Christen. So that means one of us is old. I'm actually 8 years older than Wendy. So one of us is.
It's you. Old. Okay.
So that's right. We have a daughter who is a senior at Samford University in Birmingham, and our son is a freshman at Samford University in Birmingham. So we're able to drop them both off at the same place, which is great. And so they're great. And then I started in the business world, eventually wound up at Chick-Fil-A managing their regional marketing and beverage marketing and sports marketing for them. And then 17 years ago, made a weird career move to help launch a church in the Atlanta area with North Point Ministries. It's called Buckhead Church at the time. And then 17 years later, we launched 2 other churches called Gwinnett Church. And then along those lines, several years ago, we launched something called the For movement, which has really spread, to your point, to churches and organizations, trying to be known for what they're for. And that's very exciting because, as you well know, we live in a hypercritical, cynical world nowadays. And we're looking for a community of people that want to rise up and say, we want to be known more for what we're for and who we're for than what we're against. And it just got to the point last year that we made a decision to close down our tenure at our church that we started and move into coaching churches and businesses and individuals about this. So it's been great. So I'm 4 months into this thing. So here we go.
Yeah, that's exciting. Okay, so I want to get into all of that for sure. But before we do, since this is a podcast for kids, I always love to start us out with something fun. So do you have a good joke for us?
Okay, here's the difference between dogs and cats. All
Okay.
right. So dogs look at their owners and say, you feed me, you pet me, you shelter me, you love me, you must be God. Cats
Okay.
look at their owners and say, you feed me, you pet me, you shelter me, you love me, I must be God. That's the difference between dogs and cats. So all the cat people can email me at christenclark.com.
That's right. Yeah. See, I owned a cat growing up, or our family had a cat growing up, and then I owned a dog a few years ago, and I can attest that is so true. It's
Isn't it?
funny because it's true.
That's right. That's right. That's right.
Yes. Well, that's awesome. Okay, so let's get into your business, talking about being for. What do you mean by that?
Mhm. So I spent, as I mentioned, a number of years in the business world and nonprofit world, and I really was blessed to work for Chick-Fil-A, which is a multi-billion-dollar company that has experienced explosive growth. At the same time, I worked for North Point Ministries, which was named a couple of years ago as the largest church in America. So I was telling a mentor of mine, wow, how cool is that? I got to serve for two thriving organizations, one in the business world and one in the nonprofit world. And he said, well, it's true, but you have a stewardship responsibility. What did you learn while you were there,
Wow.
particularly about what caused these two organizations to grow? And I
Yeah.
thought, wow, that's an interesting thought. And he goes, if you could put it down on half a piece of paper and tell the rest of us, because we want to grow our businesses, we want to grow our organizations, we want to grow our relationships, we want to grow. So I thought about that in terms of what I had observed and experienced, and it really came down to two questions. Question number one is, what do you want to be known for? What do you want your business to be known for? Do you want your church to be known for? What do you want your organization to be known for? And what do you want to be known for personally?
Yeah.
And then the second question is, what are you known for? That is the customer's reflection back to you on whether or not you are delivering on question number one. That's the question. The answer. That's the customer's reflection on how you are delivering your brand promise. It's also the answer of the people in your life. So it's one thing for me, Christen, to say, I want to be an amazing dad. But ultimately, you have to go to Jesse and Cole and say, hey, how's your dad doing?
Yeah.
But here's the power of those two questions, both personally and professionally. When the answers to those two questions match, when what you want to be known for is what you're known for, then you experience explosive growth, both personally and professionally, because the unique vision that you want to bring to your life is being realized by the people in your life. But the challenge is there's a gap in an organization, in a business, and in all our personal lives. But that shouldn't discourage us. It should inspire us every day to shrink the gap between those two questions. And that's why the subtitle of my book was A Great Growth Strategy for Work, but an even better strategy for life. So these two questions I carry around with me, and I have them bothered me in a really good way.
Yeah.
Because there's a gap in my life right now. And that's okay, because I'm not perfect and no one listening to this is perfect. But every day is an opportunity for me to shrink the gap. So I hope at the end of my life, people will say, you know what? Jeff certainly wasn't perfect, but man, he strived to close the gap between what he wanted to be known for and what we experienced him being for.
Yeah, I think that's such a good point. Like it's okay if we're not perfect at it, but it's still something that we should make as a goal. What was it about, you said you worked at Chick-fil-A. What was it about Chick-fil-A that they really embodied this? Like they really showed they were for their customers.
So many things, but let me give you one that I actually opened the book up with. I was driving Truett Cathy, the founder of Chick-fil-A, to a speaking engagement.
Mm-hmm.
And, I was imagining that we were going to talk about the business and chicken prices and all that kind of stuff, which we did. But Truett turned the conversation to ask just, hey, how are you enjoying working here? And does Wendy enjoy being a spouse of a staff person? We started talking about being a father and how do you have a thriving business? Because here's a guy that, has a multi-million-dollar business, and yet all three of his kids and all of his grandkids really would rise up and say, he's a great man. And our mom, Jeanette, is a great mom. And I thought, how did you do that? And so we had this incredible conversation. And at the end of the day, that night driving away, I realized the secret to how he grew the business. And one of the secrets, it doesn't hurt that you have a great chicken sandwich. Okay. So that helps. You gotta have a good chicken
good.
But Truett was more interested in the business growing people than people growing the business. And that's how the business grew. So let me say that again. Truett was more interested in the business growing people holistically, than he was people growing the business. But he knew this, and this is what was so wise about this, that if the business grew the people and truly cared about the people, then you have a group of people that are getting better and they're growing every day. And
Yeah.
if you have an organization and the people aren't growing, then you've put a lid on the potential of the organization, which, Christen, this is why it just boggles my mind sometimes when I see really smart people with MBAs, all this pedigree, and yet they're treating people so poorly at work, so cavalierly at work, and it just drives me crazy. So when I was working at Chick-Fil-A, I realized they genuinely care about me. And as a result of that, guess what I did? I gave them my very, very best. And here I am,
Yeah.
even though I left to be a church planter, I'm still talking about that on your podcast. And they're not
Yeah.
paying me anything, Christen.
That's
So this is free advertising for them.
like they need it, man. Their
That's
stuff's
true.
so
That's
good,
true. Yeah.
especially with families. We families love Chick-fil-A for sure.
Well, and here's a kids meal strategy for all them, and the moms and dads know this, but this is the way Chick-fil-A thinks. When it comes to kids meals, the strategy for kids meal is not to give a kid, is not the target market is not the kid.
Mm-hmm.
The target market is the parent, to try to give them something that they can interact with and benefit the relationship with the parent child. And I just thought that was a brilliant strategy,
Yeah.
because you would think a kids meal is for the kid. No, a kids meal is for the parent, ultimately trying to serve the kid. And I just love that strategy.
Yeah, that's so good. Tell us about what it is about the church that you think we need this message about being for our community and for people.
When we started Gwinnett Church, Christen, we asked these questions I just mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
What do we want to be known for, and what are we known for? And at the time, Gwinnett Church wasn't known for anything, because we weren't even, we weren't even.
Yeah, you hadn't started.
It's these early startup days, which I personally love, and I'm back in these early startup days. They're exhausting, but they're fun as well.
Yeah.
This is where a lot of the memories are created, in the early startup days.
Yeah.
So we asked the question, okay, let's take a big picture view. What is the church globally known for? And someone in that meeting said, when it comes to church, many people are more familiar with what the church is against rather than what the church is for. As for us, we should be known for who and what we're for. And we all looked at each other. It was a small little team of just 4 people, and we thought, that's it. So what are we for? And we live in Gwinnett County, which will soon be the most populated county in Georgia. It's one of the most diverse counties in the southeastern United States. Huge potential to impact people. And we thought, well, we're for Gwinnett students. We're for Gwinnett businesses. We're for Gwinnett schools. We're for Gwinnett adults. And so we're for Gwinnett families. And that's when we launched this. We put a sign out on the property that we bought and just said #for Gwinnett. It didn't say GwinnettChurch.org. It didn't have a Bible verse. And it just said #for Gwinnett. And I got feedback that said, hey, how are they going to know it's a church? And I said, exactly. They're going to have to figure it out.
Yeah.
And then we gave everybody T-shirts that said For Gwinnett. And then that generated word of mouth advertising and vision carriers. And so that just began to grow our church when people would say our vision statement. But what happened a couple of years later, Christen, I started getting coffee mugs and T-shirts in the mail from For Toronto and For Guatemala and For El Paso and For the Valley in California. And other churches were starting to grow this thing, and it just became viral. And so that's been a fun thing to see. And I've been able to travel around the country just seeing these church leaders. And then even, it's I don't know how I feel about this. It's gotten into politics too. And, but I do like this, the Atlanta Braves, that I actually worked for in marketing many years ago. They did for the ATL for Atlanta. So,
cool.
So that was fun to see. I think this idea of, hey, I think we're done with negativity. I think negativity eventually has a diminishing law of return. Let's go in the 4 area. And certainly in life, there's certainly things that we're against, right?
Sure.
But we want to be known for who and what we're for. So it's been fun to see this kind of spread. But the thing I love about it is it applies to families. It applies to husbands and wives, brothers and sisters.
How do you think it applies to families? Like, what can a family do to show that they're for something like this?
I think every day a family, particularly I'm just speaking from my perspective, particularly as a dad, what do I need to do to let my kids and my wife know that I'm for them? And particularly, how do I do it in a way that really resonates with them? So I'm naturally an encourager at heart. So I write my kids notes all the time. But my wife is, if you've ever done the 5 love languages, my wife is quality time, and I'm
Okay.
words of affirmation. So early on in our marriage, I would leave her notes at the coffee pot, and I would expect to get a text or a call or, hey,
Yeah.
thanks for the note. And so finally, I never did. I'd be like, well, I mean, sometimes, most of the time I didn't, because she's not words of affirmation, right? She's quality time. But so I would call her and go, hey, did you get my note? I left the coffee pot. Oh, yeah, thanks. Hey, when are you getting home? What time are you? Because she's words of affirmation. So what I was doing is I was showing Wendy that I was for her by loving her out of my love language, which was our words of affirmation.
Wow. Yeah.
And so understanding how your kids are wired, how your spouse is wired, is one of the best ways that you can show them.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, like you said, you have to get to know that person too. Like if you know them well, you know what it takes for them to be encouraged or feel loved. Tell us a little bit about your book. Like, how did you decide to write a book about this? We'll be right back after this. Raising kids in the digital age isn't easy, but Bark Technology makes products that help parents keep their kids safe online and in real life. They have an app, a phone, and a home device that lets families set parental controls on their internet-connected devices. I love the app because it helps us manage screen time and blocks websites and apps we want our kids to avoid. It also sends alerts and gives us the ability to monitor texts and social media and even track your child's location. Visit bark.us to learn more about how you can keep your kids safe online. Use the code COLLIDEKIDS to get 15% off your subscription of the Bark app.
That's a good question. After so many opportunities of seeing this just spread, that was really kind of gave me the first clue. But then I had a friend of mine that was in South Dakota, Carrie Newhoff, who's lives in Canada, and he travels around. He's got he's got a great podcast. And he took a picture of some church in South Dakota that was doing for their community. And
Wow.
Carrie's one of my best friends. And so he texted me and said, okay, I've had it. I've been all over the world. I see this being done, and nobody knows. They're just picking this up on the internet from you, but you're not being a good steward of this idea. You need to write a book and let us know what this is. And he goes, so I think, I'm going to challenge you. And he connected me with his agent, and she got a book deal. But the cool thing was, I think that I was able to write the book in about 60 days because it was something that I had lived for the last 9 years. This wasn't something I was making up. This was just something I was kind of recording. But I specifically wanted to write it to business leaders. And because I just feel like as impactful as a church can be, I still believe a business can be just as impactful. Sure. And I wanted people to be able to take this book into his public school library and put it in there and have no qualms about that. And that's happened. So It's just been fun to see. And then I went around the country before COVID hit and went to 25 cities and did a book tour, and planning to do that in 2021 at some point. So we'll see. Yeah,
that would be awesome. And I think that's cool that you have a friend that encouraged you that way. Like, I know this is what you're all about. You need to do this. So we need friends like that can push us, right?
Absolutely. And people that can speak honest and truth in our lives. And, both Carrie and I have what I call the brag zone, that we can be honest and say, hey, this something really good happened today, and I want to tell you about it. And there's no judgment about, saying, hey, this was excited. Hey, I was on Christen Clark's podcast. How cool is that? Cool. At the same time, he can go, hey man, you're not being a good steward of this idea. I'm challenging you to write a book. You need those people in your life. I think we all want fans, and we don't want foes, but we need friends. And Carrie is certainly a friend.
Right. And friends are, like you said, they're going to be encouraging, and they're also going to push you to do what you need to do. So that's good. That's a good definition of a friend. I like that.
That's right.
You have something you were telling me about earlier called Champion Tribes. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. So my former boss at Chick-Fil-A, David Salyers, went to a bar mitzvah of a neighbor of his and had never been to a Jewish bar mitzvah. And he was just so moved by it. But you realize, in the Western culture, in Christian world, there's really not a rite of passage journey. And in history, this has been such a huge thing in civilizations to have a rite of passage journey.
Yeah.
So he created one. He looked around, and there were a few books on it, but there wasn't an experience that you could create. So he created one for his oldest son, and I came to speak at it in his basement, and it was just 5 12-year-old boys and 5 dads, and they were on a year-long journey that would culminate in this big ceremony. And when I saw it and spoke at it in his basement, I thought, I want to do this when my son gets to be 12. At the same time, my wife was doing something very similar with my daughter, a rite of passage for her. So when Cole got to be 12, we did that. It was so powerful. And I told David, we can't let this end here. And so we launched a Champion Tribes experience for dads. There's a Treasure Tribes experience that a friend of ours, Courtney DeFeo, launched as well. So if you're a mom with a daughter, you could go to Treasure Tribes. If you're a dad with a 12-year-old or 13-year-old son, you could go to championtribes.com. But it's all done for you. You get a kit, it's online platform, you get teaching and everything. So you don't have to do anything other than make sure you have calendars and 4 or 5 dads that will journey with you. But it is one of the highlights of my life as a dad doing this. Because ultimately, I told Cole, you're no longer a boy. From this point forward, you're a man. I'm going to treat you like a man. And these memories that we have now will only begin to grow. And so that's, so I would highly encourage, whether you do Champion Tribes or Treasure Tribes or not, if you've got a son or daughter that's trending toward the teenage years, you need to have a rite of passage journey in some form or fashion.
Yeah.
It will require a good amount of work in terms of calendaring. The other thing that we really appreciated, Christen, was the community, because the boys would interact with each other, and it was really good for the dads as well.
That's
and then
cool.
The dads would impact and say things into the boy's life as well. It wasn't just the dad. And it was just a great, meaningful experience. And so I'm so grateful I did that. So yeah, I would check out Treasure Tribes or Champion Tribes.
Yeah, I love that idea. My kids are 8 and 9, and so definitely thinking in the future for that. I think that's a great resource for families to check out. Tell us a little bit about going back to being for something. Thinking about all of our kids that are listening right now, what are some ways that kids can show that they are for people?
Well, here's a thing that a truth I think about kids, and I think this is true when you and I were growing up. It takes you a while to realize that your parents are human beings too. Mm-hmm. And that just at some point that clicks. The younger it clicks, the better, because one of the best things that kids could do for parents is to encourage them and say, hey, thanks for being a great mom. Thanks for being a great dad. Even writing them a handwritten note would be a great thing to do. If any of the kids today would write their parents a handwritten note, you might actually see your parents faint and pass out. Because it's so rare for kids nowadays. It's one thing. I'm not saying thank you. I'm talking about thank you. That's one thing. We need to say thank you. I'm saying for kids to encourage their parents and say, thank you for being my mom. Thank you for being my dad.
Yeah.
That, I guarantee you write that note to your dad or mom, they won't throw that note away. They will keep that note for the rest of their life. So, and here's another thing for extra credit, do the dishes, clean up around the house without being told, clean your room without being told, be proactive. And if you learn the value of being proactive at an early age, the benefits will be astonishing the older that you get.
Absolutely. That's good. And I think, like we said earlier, it starts, if we could start these things with our families who we know really well, then it just trickles out into our other relationships with our friends and our small group and our teacher and things like that. So that's incredible that we could do that. Mm-hmm. Are there any verses in the Bible or any Bible story characters that stand out to you that they showed that they were for people?
So when I sign books, I sign Romans 8:31, that says,
Okay.
if God is for us, what can be against us? And that's the pivotal line for me, because the assumption is that God is for us. And if God is for us, what can possibly stand against the unstoppable force of God? And so
Yeah.
that allows me to go, okay, so not a lot of people are launching businesses within the middle of a global pandemic. But if God is for me, then what can stand against me? And that doesn't mean we do anything foolish. It doesn't mean we do run out haste. We seek wisdom. We seek wise counsel, which Wendy and I did when we made this decision. But at the end of the day, I'm not going to let fear guide me. And that verse, Romans 8:31, is a foundational verse for me, because anytime I feel the fear rising up, I go, okay, do you believe God is for you?
Wow.
Yes. By the way, I talk to myself. I don't know if anyone else on the podcast talks to themselves.
I do that too.
All right. Good. So do you believe God is for you? Yes. Do you believe that this fear can potentially hold you back? Yes. Then the worst thing that could happen is that this thing fails, but God's still for you and you keep moving forward. And it might not be this idea. It might be the idea that you push through to get to that idea.
Yeah.
So that Romans 8:31 is the verse that I've signed every book with. Romans 8:31. If God is for us, who can be against us? What can be against us?
That's a great verse. And I think thinking about God, a lot of people, especially if they're new to faith or they're just, or they might be in a church setting that teaches them a lot about a God who is all about rules and about justice. And we think, okay, God is disappointed in me. God is upset with me. I hurt God's feelings. But that verse right there says, if God is for me. So recognizing that God is for you,
Mm-hmm.
I think that changes your relationship with God completely.
Absolutely. My favorite definition of the word for is to be in favor of.
Uh-huh.
And that's why, arguably the most famous Bible verse of them all, John 3:16, starts with the word for.
Wow.
For
I hadn't
God.
thought about that.
And so what that's saying is this is what God is in favor of.
Yeah.
For God so loved the world. And that's not a impersonal word. That world includes you. So I encourage people to add their name in there. For God so loved Christen. For God so loved Mary. For God so loved Steve. And so in that understanding, you have to understand that at the end of the day, God is in favor of you.
Yeah.
And yeah, there's discipline, there's course correction, there's all that. But all that's based out of love, not disappointment.
Right. Exactly. That's such a good point. I hadn't thought about that. John 3:16 starts with for. I think there's a lot of Bible verses actually that start with for.
Well, John 3:17 also starts with the word for. So and as much publicity as John 3:16 gets, John 3:17 is just as good. And so, but those two verses are in essence saying that God is in favor of you.
Absolutely. That's so good. Well, this has been so great, Jeff. Thank you so much for sharing your heart on this. And I hope that a lot of churches and a lot of families will take on this idea of showing not what they're against, but what they're for. I think this is awesome. I always like to just close the show out by asking my guests to share a memory from when they were a kid. Since this is a kids podcast, do you have a memory from when you were a kid?
So many. I remember when I was in the 5th grade, I won the 100-yard dash at our elementary school. So I was the fastest kid in the class, right? So after school, my friends would come over and they would play in our front yard. But my mom noticed there were cars that were driving by our road, and she saw a car that went by a little bit too fast. So she called the city and said, "Hey, could I put a sign at our yard that tells drivers to slow down?" So she, one of those yellow signs that says "Slow, children at play." Uh-huh. So I'm coming home one day and I didn't know this, my mom was concerned about this. So I'm coming home from school one day. I'm the fastest kid in my class. I've got visions of Olympic glory in my mind. And I get off the bus and I look at this sign and I read it and it says, "Slow children play." And I'm like, I'm not slow. I'm the fastest kid in my class. What are you talking about? I won the 100-yard dash. So I ran down the driveway to my mom and said, "Mom, one of my friends, they're making fun of me because they put a sign out in our yard that says that I'm slow." And she's like, "No, I put that sign out there." Like, You put that sign up there. I mean, don't you remember? I'm the fastest kid in my class. And so obviously at that moment, my mom realized we don't have a genius at the house. He's going to have academic challenges in his life. But I'm telling you, Kristen, for the rest of my life, even to this day, my wife will, if we see a slow children at play, she just starts laughing. So
That
anyway,
is so funny.
I may have ruined that sign for the rest of you, or
Yes,
maybe
you
a good way
have.
to laugh at it from here this point forward.
Well, I think we need to petition to put punctuation on that sign.
I
So it
just need a
says
comma.
stop.
All I need is a
comma.
comma or an exclamation.
Sure.
But if you read the complete the complete sentence, it does say slow children at play.
Wow. So you are also for punctuation.
That's right. That's right. So that has permanently scarred me in life.
Well, thank you again so much for being on the show. That was a great story. And if you want to, will you tell everybody again how they can find more information about Champion Tribes and also about your company?
Yeah, so they can just go to jeffhenderson.com and they can, and there's some free resources there, and they can get the book. And then I would encourage them, once they get the book, my cell phone number's in the back, and I would love for them to text me. And I get a text a day from people, and it's so fun just to hear what people are doing with this idea. That's not my idea. I'm just the steward of it. And so,
Yeah.
So it's been great. So get the book, jeffhenderson.com, and then text me, and let's be cell phone friends.
That's amazing. That's awesome that you give out your phone number. Well, thank you again so much for being on the show. This was a great conversation. I hope a lot of families will enjoy this and get a lot out of it.
Happy New Year, Kristen.
Thank you so much. Well, I am for Jeff Henderson. I love that he thought the slow sign was about him when he was a kid. I love the tagline for the For company. It says, "In a world often known for what it's against, let's be known for what we are for." Whatever you are right now, a little kid, a student, a parent, a church leader, a teacher, you can start today letting people know you are for them. And one way you can do that is starting with your family, taking the initiative, like he said, and encouraging one another. I thought that was so good. And I loved when Jeff said that if you believe God is for you, what could possibly stand against the unstoppable force of God? So don't let fear hold you back. And what a great thought to add your name to John 3:16. I don't think I've ever done that before, to say, "For God so loved Kristen." It really does change the way I think about God. And it helps me understand how God thinks about me. God is for me. That's a lot of thinking. Okay, well, if you are a mom or a dad or a church leader, I highly recommend you check out his resources on his website, jeffhenderson.com, and also go look into Champion Tribes and Treasure Girls with a Z. Those are some great resources. Well, now it's time for the kids only segment. This is the part of the show where you get to be on the podcast. So here is my friend Eleanor sharing her joke.
Hello, my name is Eleanor Johnson, and this is my Bible joke. Did you know that baseball was mentioned in the Bible? It starts off in the big inning.
In the big inning. I get it. That was a good joke, Eleanor. Thanks. Eleanor's my buddy. Well, if you would like to be on the podcast, I would love to hear your favorite Bible verse or joke or quote or any question you might have. It's really easy to do. Just have a grown-up help you go to my podcast website, anchor.fm/collidekidspod. And on that page, there's a place for you to leave me a message. If you need more information, you can find all of this on my social media pages. I'm on Facebook at the Collide Kids Podcast or on Instagram at Collide Kids Pod. If you're enjoying this podcast, it would mean so much to me if you would share it with your friends and family. And don't forget to subscribe to the podcast so that new episodes will automatically load each week into whatever podcast app you're using. And give us a rating and a review on your podcast app. That actually helps other people find out about the show so they can listen too. Well, I hope today you have been challenged, like me, to think about, what am I known for? Do others know that I'm for them? Well, one way you can start is to reach out to your friends and family and say something encouraging or just be a good listener. Well, in case no one has told you today, let me be the first to remind you, God loves you so much. He's for you. Thanks for listening.
You don't have to go very far looking for bad news because somehow it just finds you. So finding peace in the chaos can be really difficult, but it doesn't have to be because the River mobile app exists. The River is a Christian music radio station dedicated to playing music to help you get through life's toughest moments or life's happiest moments and everywhere in between. And all from artists who love Jesus and are real people just like you. Listening is easy. You can download it wherever you get apps from. Just search 1049 The River or listen online at riverradio.com. And know that The River is proud to partner with the Collide Kids podcast.